Hello, and welcome to the FY26 Social Equity Grant Program Informational Webinar. My name is Juan Vega. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Communities and Programs here at the Executive Office of Economic Development. I did want to take a quick opportunity to say this webinar is being recorded, and we will be planning to post a copy of this webinar on the website. We are inviting all attendees. We thank you for joining us. We are inviting you all, if you have questions at any time, you can start submitting those questions through the Q&A function here in Zoom. We will proceed with our presentation, and then we'll move into question and answers, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we're able to during the time allotted. Any questions, many of the questions may also be included in an FAQ document to be posted on the website. With that, we'll just jump right in. Well, let me just take an opportunity to have my colleagues introduce themselves as well. Joe.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joseph Gilmore. I'm the Program Administrator for the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund.
Morning, I'm Rob McGovern. I am Deputy General Counsel for the Executive Office of Economic Development.
Morning, everyone. I'm Erin Oliveri. I'm the Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs and Policy at the Executive Office of Economic Development.
Great. Thank you all. So if we advance into the first slide. So just to kind of level set and get us started, we want to just recap what the Social Equity Grant Program is. It builds, what we're trying to do here is build on the success of the FY25 round, which is designed to support cannabis entrepreneurs at various stages of the licensing process, which includes pre-licensed cannabis businesses, pending provisional licensees, and cannabis businesses with a provisional or final license issued by the Cannabis Control Commission, hereinafter referred to as the CCC. Eligible applicants can apply for past or future expenses in a wide range of categories, which ideally what we're trying to support is entry or expansion in the regulated cannabis industry, everything from the acquisition initially of a license all the way to the improvement and expansion of a business. Next up, we want to just go up in the next slide, just go through some key dates. The NOFA for this round was published on October 31st. It is available on the Cannabis Social Equity Grant Program or the Trust Fund's webpage. The application deadline is set for December 11th at 11:59 p.m. We intend to review these applications and provide notification of award decisions during January of 2026. And overall, as we'll get into the details, Tier 1 and 2 expectations are that those projects, if awarded, are to be completed by June 30th of 26, and Tier 3 and 4 would be for projects that can be completed by December of 2026. Next up, we want to highlight a few things out of the NOFA. The grant award sizes will range from $25,000 to $300,000. And we will, in this presentation, we will get down into some details of that. Eligible applicants, similar to the prior round, will be pre-licensed cannabis businesses, pending provisional licensees, and then final licensees. The allowable use of funds is past and future expenses that support either the entry into the industry, acquisition of licensure, and as I mentioned, commencement or continuation of business operations, as well as improvements and expansion. The evaluation criteria, which we'll also detail in this presentation, will really be focused on the applicant business's eligibility, their social equity status and ownership, and then we'll be looking for clear project descriptions and realistic timelines that will lay out a project, as noted, that can be completed in the time frame of a contract, and then demonstrate a need and readiness to deploy the financial assistance. On the next slide, we really want to focus on some things that are new or updated in this round. We have eliminated the match grant requirement, as well as the timing restriction on past expenses. So we will leave it open for discretion of the grantees to to submit and present for reimbursement a wide range of expenses that have been taking place. Still will need to be reviewed and approved at the discretion of EOED, but we are opening up and widening those restrictions. We're also going to work to expedite reimbursement requests so that we're able to allocate these funding allocations in a more expedited way. We are increasing prioritization in this round for the existing and operating licensed cannabis businesses, including businesses with economic empowerment priority applicant status. We're also going to be looking for applicants that may have applied but did not receive a grant in the prior round. New support is being offered in this round for businesses in the example of having perhaps been awarded a Tier 1 grant last year that have now moved in and are ready to submit an application to the CCC. We will also be providing support to help them move into that next phase. And of course, ensuring the equitable distribution of available grant funds throughout the state and in all types of businesses. We are limiting each business as well as each majority owner of a business to one application submission. On the next slide, at a high level, the basic eligibility to be able to participate in this grant program is that you need to be a duly organized business entity in good standing and located in Massachusetts, be designated by the CCC as an economic empowerment priority applicant, have a majority ownership comprised of individuals that are economic empowerment, or be a social equity program participant. And third, we look that you qualify within one of the 4 available tiers, depending on your CCC license status. On the next slide, we want to, this is based on that eligibility, and just at a high level, the tiers that we're talking about for this round. Each business entity or majority owner of such entity may submit one application based on their applicant status to one of the following tiers. Tier 1 will be primarily focused for pre-licensed cannabis businesses. The projects that we're looking to support are those that are going to support the entry into the regulated business industry, similar to what we did last year. In Tier 2, this tier is different this year. It was formerly known as the immediate needs category. We're now doing a pending provisional licensee. This is really to support, again, as I mentioned, those businesses that are now prepared to submit for licensing to the CCC to support them in that next step. The provisional licensee or final license without a notice to commence operation is Tier 3. For this category, we want to support the acquisition of that final license or the steps needed to get to commencement of business operations, and the maximum grant size in that category will be $200,000. And finally, we have Tier 4, the final license that already has a notice to commence operations and or is currently operational. We're providing grant sizes up to $300,000 to support the continuation of those operations, or when needed to improve or expand the businesses. So we definitely recognize the need to support the business's current operations, as well as be able to help any business that is prepared to expand or grow. With that, I will now turn it over to my colleague Joe, who will now walk us through each of the tiers in detail in terms of allowable uses of fund, et cetera. And I do thank you for your participation in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan. So now we'll get into the nitty-gritty of each tier, including the allowable use of funds. So for Tier 1, this is for pre-licensed cannabis businesses, which are defined as businesses that don't currently have a cannabis license from the CCC, or an application pending with the CCC that intends to apply for a cannabis establishment or a medical marijuana treatment center. So again, this is a up to $25,000 grant to support past and future expenses that support entry into the regulated marketplace. So the allowable use of funds for Tier 1 are professional fees, which include professional services such as legal, accounting, architectural, or consulting services. Facility fees, including lease or mortgage payments, or utilities, for example, waste management, water bills, electric or gas bills. And then regulatory and compliance fees, which include municipal permitting fees, banking fees to maintain financial accounts for applicant businesses, as well as licensing or regulatory fees from the CCC. Tier 2 is for pending provisional licensees, which are defined as businesses that have submitted a marijuana establishment or a medical marijuana treatment center license application to the CCC and have received notice that the application has been deemed complete and is currently under review. So this is a up to $50,000 grant to support past and future expenses that support the acquisition of a provisional license. And the allowable use of funds for this category are the same as Tier 1, which include the professional fees, facility fees, and regulatory and compliance fees. So for Tier 3, this is for license acquisition and commencement of business operations. So eligibility for Tier 3 is businesses with a provisional or a final license without notice to commence operations from the CCC. So this is up to $200,000 grant to support past and future expenses that support acquisition of final licensure or commencement of business operations. And so there is a breakdown in the NOFA. These are the allowable use of fund categories, but I'm also going to read off some examples just so that we're clear on what is allowed. So the first three, professional fees, facility fees, and regulatory fees, are the same as I mentioned in for Tier 1 and Tier 2. But to continue on, we have debt service, which includes loan repayments or business debt service, both principal and interest, for allowable use of funds. And then we have equipment capital expenses, which include the purchase and installation of equipment from third-party vendors that is necessary for cannabis establishment operations. For example, growing or manufacturing machinery, packaging machinery, or things that are needed in terms of equipment for your business to operate. Next, we have facility capital expenses. So this category includes construction, renovation, or build out of facility, including security and building systems, installation and maintenance of things such as HVAC, electrical, or plumbing. And eligible facility capital expenses must be performed or purchased by third-party contractors or vendors. And just to add, costs related to self-construction are ineligible for this category. Additionally, business-related insurance fees, excluding any insurance related to payroll costs. So think general liability, building insurance, things of that nature. Then we have delinquent Massachusetts Department of Revenue taxes. So if you're behind on the DOR taxes, that is another eligible use. And then finally, we have vehicle expenses up to $25,000. And so this relates to the expenses for the lease or purchase of vehicles used to distribute, transport, or deliver marijuana or marijuana products, or to outfit such vehicles with security and compliance equipment required by the CCC. So think cameras, GPS tracking devices, lock boxes, or other necessary safety features to meet compliance with the CCC. And just another note that the vehicle expenses are limited to businesses with a delivery or transporter license from the CCC. And Tier 4 is for existing business support. So those who are eligible for Tier 4 are businesses with a final license that have received notice to commence operations from the CCC. So this is up to $300,000 grant to support past or future expenses that directly support the continuation of business operations or to improve or expand the business. So the allowable use of funds for this category are the same as Tier 3 with the addition of personnel expenses up to $50,000. and some more context on the personnel expenses. So these will include business payroll expenses, including fringe benefits and payroll tax contributions for W-2 employees. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the NOFA for the specific details on personnel expenses and just all around the allowable use of funds. Additionally, there are specific conditions that apply to certain use of grant funds. Again, check out the NOFA for those details. Specifically, just wanted to call out related party transactions. So grantees are prohibited from using grant funds to pay for allowable uses from any owner, shareholder, member, officer, or director, or employee of the applicant, or their immediate family member, or any business entity in which the owner or the applicant business holds a majority interest, directly or indirectly, unless such transaction is a bona fide transaction. Debt service. So just some context with debt service, grant funds may be used to pay service on existing loans entered into by the applicant entity for allowable use of funds. Loans must be evidenced by a signed and dated written agreement between the borrower and the lender. And you can check out the NOFA for additional conditions on debt service. And then finally, as I mentioned, personnel expenses are only for Tier 4 for operating businesses, and there's a limitation of $50,000 on payroll expenses, specifically for W-2 employees that are directly engaged in the day-to-day cannabis business operations. So payroll expenditures are available for the first $30 per hour of wages, and no more than $5,000 per employee. So here we have the evaluation criteria on how these applications are going to be scored. So this will be on a 100-point scale, and the areas of how we'll be scoring are outlined below. So we want to ensure that the business or the application has a clear business description and leadership capacity. So that's up to 20 points. Detailed project description with realistic timeline and outcomes. That's up to 20 points. Compelling statement of need and clearly outlined budget proposal, up to 20 points. Applicants that did not receive a FY25 Social Equity Grant Program grant, that will get them 15 points. Applicants designated by the CCC as an economic empowerment priority applicant, or that have a majority ownership comprised of individuals that are EEs, that's another 15 points. And then cannabis business is located in an area of disproportionate impact is 5 points. And then social equity ownership of 75% or more is 5 points. So for the disbursement of funds, as it relates to contracting, all applicants awarded a grant are required to enter into a grant agreement with EOED prior to the disbursement of any funds. For Tier 1 and Tier 2 grantees, you'll receive the full grant amount upon contract execution. And for Tier 3 and Tier 4 grantees, you'll receive funds based on cost reimbursement requests. And so grantees may submit requests on a rolling basis once they've documented a minimum of $50,000 in expenses, and in a cadence of one per month, at no more than one request per month. So acceptable documentation for reimbursement requests, you can refer to Appendix A of the NOFA, which includes details on acceptable documentation for reimbursement requests. And generally, grantees should submit at least 2 forms of documentation evidencing the use of grant funds, which include an invoice or service agreement and a proof of payment, such as like receipts or pictures of bank transactions. So here, I'm just going to quickly overview the application and how to get started. So, first you will go to the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund website. You'll click the Apply Now button. You'll get a list of the 4 tiers that are available, and you'll click Submit to get started. If you haven't already created a submittable account, then you'll need to create a new one. If you already have an old one, just log into that, and then you'll be able to start the application. There is an eligibility screening for all tiers, which you must ensure that you answer in order to ensure that you're eligible for this program, and then you can finally start the application. So what I'm going to do just really quickly is just show you all, how to get to the application, just so that it's clear for everybody. So if you haven't been to the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund webpage, I recommend that you check it out. Just Google Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund, and this is the first link that comes up. So if you scroll down, you'll see a table of contents. I'll click the FY26 Social Equity Grant Program. There's also a lot of other helpful information here that can just provide more context on the program. So I'll click this button. It goes down to the FY26 Social Equity Grant Program. Keep scrolling down. You'll see the notice of funding availability here if you want to read the program guidelines. And then there's a button for apply here. So I'll just click here. And then you'll get to this page, which lists the 4 tiers that we have available to apply for. You can also click the guidelines button, and it also provides a blurb about, just a short, concise kind of program detail. And then there's also this application template. So there, for each tier, we also provided an application template so that you can kind of preview what the questions are, and so you can get an understanding of what is required, which documentation we're asking for. So you can print this out to help you prepare and just ensure that you have all the proper information. You can also download. You can print out a copy just so you have a physical version. There's actually one more thing that I wanted to mention here. So if you go into the apply here button and then you hit submit, I'm already logged in. So I'm already logged into my submittable account. If you scroll down, there's this button here, manage collaborators. So if you want to, have other people have access to your application, some people are working with teams or consultants. You can hit this button, manage collaborators, and then you can add a collaborator email so that they're able to access the application as well. But the account that started the application is the only one that is able to submit. Just keep in mind. All right, so I'll just jump back into the presentation here. And so that's an overview of the application. So a complete application packet includes the following components. So there's 5 sections in each application. There's the eligibility confirmation. There's information about business entity applying for financial assistance, information about the cannabis business and its licensing status, the project narrative for section 4, and then the project funding request on section 5. Then there's also actually a section 6 for certifications that you need to review and accept all of those requirements. So here we have acceptable documentation documents. So again, this is in the NOFA down in Appendix A. So you can read about all of these in terms of what you need to provide to show that you're eligible for the program. So for business ownership, we're looking for documentation evidencing all current ownership interests in the applicant business that may include bylaws, operating agreements, or recent CCC license documentation. And documentation must reflect 100% ownership interests and be fully executed and dated. So we really want to make sure that there's a clear outline of who actually owns the business, because that's part of the eligibility for this program. You need to maintain at least 51% ownership. For social equity status, we're looking for documentation evidencing each individual or current ownership interest in the applicant business identified as an economic empowerment or social equity program participant, which may include CCC email confirmations of such status or license documentation reflecting the status of EE or SC. Next, proof of CCC licensure. So if applicable, if you're a tier 3 or a tier 4 grantee. So documentation evidencing licensure status with the Cannabis Control Commission, which may include a copy of the applicant's provisional or final license, or an active license record printed from the Cannabis Control Commission's public portal. I'll also just request that you ensure that you're providing the most recent and up-to-date license, just so that there's no confusion on whether or not the license is out of date or not active. Next, we have the proof of occupancy, if applicable. So documentation evidencing proof of occupancy for the location of the applicant business, which includes a lease agreement, mortgage statement, deed, or utility property tax bill. And finally, we have the certificates of good standing. So all applicants must submit certificates of good standing or compliance from the Massachusetts Secretary of the Commonwealth, the Department of Revenue, and Department of Unemployment Assistance dated within 30 days prior to submitting the application. All required certificates should be in the name of the entity applying for grant funds. And there are a couple exceptions for certificates of good standing, namely for tier 3 and tier 4 applicants who are applying for grant funds to satisfy delinquent Massachusetts DOR taxes should submit an attestation explaining the tax delinquency and the amount owed. And upon payment of the delinquent state taxes, the award recipient must submit the DOR certificate of good standing to the DOR. So if you're a tier 3 or 4 grantee and you don't have your DOR certificate of good standing, then you'll submit an attestation. But you also need to provide that certificate of good standing from the DOR to remain active and eligible. Go ahead. Did you have anything to add, Rob?
Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to highlight one additional thing with certificates of good standing, particularly with the Secretary of Commonwealth's organizational documents. Businesses should just ensure their organizational documents with the Secretary of Commonwealth's office reflects that there's a stated purpose for the business of engaging in activities related to the manufacture, sale, distribution, delivery, etc. of cannabis.
Right. I believe that's in the Articles of Incorporation when the application asks for that.
Correct.
Document. Yeah. Additionally, for pre-licensed cannabis businesses or for tier 1, 2, or 3 grantees or applicants that have no employees and are unable to register with the DUA, the Department of Unemployment Assistance, they may submit an attestation in lieu of that certificate. So you can just submit a letter stating that you have no employees if you don't have that DUA certificate, specifically for tiers 1, 2, and 3. All right. Lastly, we have, if you're running into any technical issues, you can also you reach out to Submittable directly. So here's the link to reach out to Submittable. Some common technical issues are sharing a login. So as I mentioned earlier, you can use the collaborator tool, but some people have issues logging in because they can't remember which email they used, which email account that they used. That's a recurring issue that we ran into last year. So just make sure that you're remembering which email that you're using so that you can log back into your current application, or you can see any past submissions that you've had. Also, not completing all required fields, including tables. So just make sure that all questions are answered in your application. And then having multiple windows open that are logged in. So the solution is to make sure that you log out of your browser and log back in. You don't want to have multiple applications open when you're submitting the application.
Great, Joe. If I could, before we move on to the frequently asked questions, I do want to excuse myself if I need to step away to attend to another meeting. But the webinar will now move into the question and answer phase. I want to highlight two things. Please use the Q&A function. The team here with Rob and Aaron and Joe are working through all of the questions and trying to be as responsive as we can. We'll have a record of your questions, so please submit them. And as I mentioned at the beginning, many of these may be incorporated into the FAQ document to share and be posted on the website. I also want to stress that the notice of funding availability, the NOFA, is we can't stress enough that really that should be your starting point. You should read that cover to cover. That really outlines all of the expectations, all of the requirements, and I think in many cases will answer some of the questions you have. But it's key because all of that information is what will feed into how we will evaluate your application once it is submitted. And so that's always the best place to start with the reading the the NOFA, getting familiar with all the requirements and expectations, and then beginning to commit your responses to the application in submittable. But yeah, with that, please submit your questions. And this webinar is scheduled until 11:30, and the team here will try to get to as many questions within that allotted time. But we will continue to read your questions and try to respond to them either here in person, or you are getting a response within the Q&A function here, or they will be published or they will be published on the website. So thank you.
Thanks, Juan. So now we'll move into the Q&A section. We have prepared a few Q&As, and then we'll get into the questions submitted by the audience. So first question we have is, I've received a grant in the previous FY25 Social Equity Grant Program round. Can I apply for a FY26 grant? And the answer is yes. Applicants from a previous round may still apply to the FY26 round. However, any awards made through the FY26 round are conditioned upon the successful closeout of all previous grant awards. So to clarify, you need to ensure that your FY25 or your FY24 contract has been successfully closed out in order to be awarded an FY26 grant. Next question, the FY26 Social Equity Grant Program round prohibited reimbursement requests for expenses incurred prior to a specific date. Are there any similar timing constraints or expenses for the FY26 round? So no, there aren't any timing constraints on when expenses are incurred. However, all expenses must be for an allowable use. Additionally, you can't get reimbursed for something that you've already been awarded grant funds for. Like if you've had an expense in FY24 and FY25 that you've already got grants funds for, you can't duplicate that. Next, I'm a majority interest holder in 2 separate licensed cannabis businesses. Can each business apply for a grant? So the answer for that is no. To ensure the equitable distribution of grant funds, each applicant business entity, including individuals with a majority ownership interest in those businesses, may only submit 1 application. And part of the reasoning for this is to just ensure that we're spreading out the funds equitably. We're really trying to provide as much support as we can for as many applicants that are eligible and have strong projects. Next up, so my business submitted a license application to the CCC for a provisional license and has not yet received notice that the application has been deemed complete. Can I apply for a grant? So yes, this business may apply for a Tier 2 pending provisional licensee grant. However, the grant award will be conditioned upon receiving notice from the CCC that the application is deemed complete prior to contracting. So say that you submitted an application, you haven't got the deemed complete notification yet. So you can still apply as a Tier 2, but in order to be contracted, you need to provide that notice to be able to receive that award. Next up, I'm not able to provide a certificate of good standing from the DOR because my business is delinquent on tax payments. Can I apply for a grant? So the answer is yes. Tier 3 and Tier 4 applicants can apply for a grant to pay for outstanding tax obligations by submitting an attestation explaining the delinquency and the amount owed. If awarded a grant, the business may submit a statement of account from the DOR evidencing proof of the payment settlement, and submit a certificate of good standing. All other applicants must provide a certificate of good standing from the DOR. Next up, is there a cash match requirement for any of these tiers? So again, we got rid of the match requirement, so there's no cash match for the FY26 round. And finally, should I report a grant from the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund as taxable income when my business files its tax returns? The answer is yes. Government grants are generally considered taxable income under federal and Massachusetts laws, and we recommend consulting with a professional accountant regarding any tax questions. All right, so now we can get into additional questions. So just from the audience, just remember, if you have any questions, use the Q&A function. First question that we have is number one, good day. I'm assuming that all FY25 contracts must be closed out to start an FY26 application, or can companies apply while closing out current FY25 contracts? So the answer is yes. If you have an open FY25 contract, you can still apply for the FY26 round. But in order to actually receive that grant award and start contracting with us, you need to have closed out your FY25 contract. So I believe the performance period for the FY25 round is December 31st, 2025. So you'll want to make sure that you complete and make all your expenses by that date, and submit a full finance report or all of your finance reports. Ensure that they're accurate in order to be eligible to accept the award if you're selected. And then the next question that he has is, should Commonwealth documentation be 2 weeks current from submitting an FY26 application? So as we mentioned in reference to the certificates of good standing, those should be dated within 30 days of the submission of the FY26 application. So it's not 2 weeks, it's within 30 days of the submission. That's when your certificates of good standing should be dated. Next up, can vehicle purchase expenses be covered by the grant for a courier license? The answer is yes. So delivery, courier, or transporter licenses are included under vehicle purchase expenses, as well as outfitting expenses for the vehicle. Next up, what if an applicant's status changes after submitted? For example, if the applicant is pending CCC review of provisional and it is awarded while the grant application is reviewed. So I mentioned earlier that if you're kind of in the in-between stage, say if you submitted your application and you're waiting for that deemed complete status, then you can still apply as tier 2, but your award will be conditioned upon that notice. And so I just be careful about the timing, just to make sure that you're actually eligible, because in order to be eligible for these certain tiers, you need to hit certain benchmarks. And without, say, a provisional license, we can't award you a tier 3 grant. Without that deemed complete notice, we can't award you a tier 2 grant. And without the notice to operations, we can't provide a tier 4 grant. Anything to add with that, Robert? That sounds about right. Okay. Next, are individuals eligible for the debt service category, assuming we have executed notes? So are individuals eligible for debt service category, assuming we have executed notes? I believe that the question to that is yes.
Yeah. Joe, I can help answer that. So yeah, the NOFA covers details on debt service, primarily that there must be a written agreement for the loan, evidencing the loan, that'll need to be submitted to us. and it has to be for allowable uses. So that should suffice.
Cool. All right. Next question is, how are grantee for tier 3 and 4 expected to produce the funds for the initial payments prior to the reimbursement without an effective grant match? So maybe this is referring to like the cadence of when people are going to be funded versus like submitting the financial reports. I think if this answers your question, basically upon contract execution, and so upon execution for tier 1 and 2 grants, they'll get the immediate disbursement of funds for their grant award. For tiers 3 and tiers 4, we will provide the funds upon contract execution, I believe, in $50,000 increments. And so the cadence will be, you will receive that first amount of funds. You'll submit a finance report evidencing those expenses, and then you'll be reimbursed another 50,000. And it will continue in that cadence. All right. Next question. As a follow-up to the timing restriction question, does that mean we can go back to prior to July 1st, 2024? The answer is yes. So there aren't any timing restrictions on past expenses now. So you can go prior to that date. Next question, is there a specific budget table that must be used? So within the application, there is a table for you to fill out. So that's the table that we'll ask you to use when submitting your application. It's just a sort of basic Excel little blurb there where you'll put in your anticipated expenses. When you're doing reporting, if you're awarded, then a reporting form will include a specific table that you must fill out. And we'll get into the specifics of reporting on a future webinar. But for the purposes of the application, there is a budget table included on the application. Okay. Just waiting for any other questions to come in. So a lot of the questions that we're getting are specific to individual businesses. And so for those sort of questions, you can reach out to Cannabis Equity Fund at mass.gov. Just trying to kind of keep it to the general questions right now.
Yeah, we have one. There's a few questions about letters of intent for lease agreements. Yes, letters of intent will suffice for evidence of the location of the business.
I got another question down here at the bottom. Can you clarify, can we apply for only one tier? So as I mentioned earlier, businesses are limited to submitting one application per majority business owner. So we're looking to just have folks apply for one application per funding round. Next question, when do you anticipate funds would be dispersed to those who are awarded? So we plan to make award announcements in January. Then after award announcements come out, there is a period of pre-contracting, so like setting up vendor codes and signing the contract, the grant contract. That could take another month or so. Conservatively, I would say, potentially around the March or April months is when you typically start to receive funds, depending on how quick you can get through the pre-contracting stage. So that means just like submitting forms correctly and doing that in a timely manner.
Joe, there's a question to explain Tier 2 again. Tier 2, again, is for pending provisional licenses. So this is for businesses, potentially past applicants that were Tier 1s, that were pre-licensed businesses that have now moved on in the licensing process, have submitted an application for a provisional license, but have not yet received approval for that provisional license. So those types of businesses can submit under Tier 2. They'll need to submit documentation evidencing that the CCC has deemed that application complete. If you have not received that notice that the CCC has deemed it complete, you may still apply for grant funds under Tier 2, but it'll be conditioned upon receiving any grant award will be conditioned upon receiving notification from the CCC that the application is deemed complete.
Right. So many folks are still paying for rent as their application is under review, and so that's a good spot for Tier 2 grantees to apply for funds.
There's a question about the limitation on costs for vehicles. There is a $25,000 limitation on all funds spent on vehicles for a single applicant.
There's a question on, is an LOI acceptable for a Tier 3 grant? So for evidence that you have occupancy of real estate, I believe that LOI would be acceptable to show that you have ownership or that you have control of your space or your retail space.
So we have a lot of questions that are coming through. A lot of them are similar questions that we previously answered. There's a lot that are specific to individual businesses that we're trying to get to. If you have a question that is specific to your business, I would suggest submitting an email to the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund email account. Joe, can you put that up on the screen so people can see?
Yeah, sure. I think it's the next slide. Here we go. So Cannabis Equity Fund at mass.gov. Those are any specific questions for applications can go. Give it another couple minutes.
We're also going to curate these questions and put out an FAQ to help answer a lot of the questions that have been submitted.
And also this webinar will be posted on the website as well. Following this email, I'll also send out an email with a copy of the slides, just so that folks can review, or anybody who is registered for this webinar, they can review that. I think we're getting to the end of the questions.
We do have a lot of questions coming in. We're still trying to answer them as much as we can at this time.
Yeah.
Joe, would you mind just reviewing the disbursement of funds details of how that'll work? There's been a few questions about that, particularly for Tier 3 and 4.
Sure. So for Tier 3 and Tier 4, once you're selected as a grantee or you're selected as an awardee, and you successfully contract with us, you sign your contract, at that point, we can issue your first disbursement or your first tranche of funds, which is $50,000 at a time. And so if you're Tier 3, you can get up to 200,000. If you're a Tier 4, you can get up to 300,000. But the cadence will be your disperse your $50,000, then you'll submit a finance report with expense documentation. And then once that's reviewed and approved, then you'll receive your next tranche of 50,000, and we'll follow that cadence until you received all of your grant funds. I suppose that there are also circumstances where if you've already incurred all those expenses, you could submit for a higher amount. But we just want to make sure that the reason that we're doing this in a sort of monthly cadence is to ensure that the funds are being spent on proper eligible use of funds. We don't want to run into situations where folks have spent all the money on things that are ineligible, and then they have to end up paying the funds back.
Some of the questions are slowing down at this point. I know there's a number of questions that we haven't been able to get to as we've been answering them live and in the chat function. We're going to continue to answer these. We, again, encourage you to send emails to the Cannabis Equity Fund at mass.gov, and we will answer your questions. And again, we're also going to post an FAQ with a lot of the questions that were submitted here. There was a lot of good questions, and we really appreciate that. Okay, with that, I think we are going to close the informational webinar at this point, and we thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, and good luck with your applications. See you later.